Rant time. This is going to be way less scripted than usual, but this is all my thoughts in the most raw, unedited way I could possibly give it to you, because the Titans have been such a huge part of my life, and I really see how disheartening it is and can be as a longtime fan, seeing the state that they're in comics, in media, and all of the above. Feel free to buckle in, get some popcorn, and see if you guys actually feel the same way I do. But yeah, without further ado, post-production Natrix, this has been a while, huh? Signing out. See ya.
When there's trouble, you know who to call.
Boy, if you don't, like, who are you feeling like, Robin? Like, you are some of my favorite heroes, but like, I'm not calling your bum ab, bro. Like, seriously. If I had a superhero crises speed dial, you would not be the first person on my list. The Titans, a bunch of kids? Even if we're in Jump City, I would try to call Superman, and he would fly here in a millisecond. Like, boy, stop. But let's be honest, everybody, and let me pose a question to the class. Who of you grew up with 2003 Teen Titans? Whoa, that is, honestly, actually, that is exactly what I expected. This show is generational. If you were in my generation, which of course is Gen Z, you would have grown up with it, even if you're like a very young millennial, right? Stretching between that 28, 29, 30 age mark. This was your body. Even if you weren't even a superhero fan to begin with, you might not even be that while watching this video, even though I am predominantly a comic book YouTube channel, you might just like the Teen Titans. I don't know if you know this guy, but there is a very popular anime and video game YouTuber called Afro Senju, and he was a big part of my childhood. And I remember distinctly, I know this is going crazily off topic, but I remember him and his friends doing a tier list about Cartoon Network shows, and they placed Teen Titans really high. And one of his friends said, I do not care about anything about DC. Mind you, this is the Dark Age, 2015, 2016 to 18 era. But this shows you how highly resonant these characters were, and still are to this day. There are so many people who are salivating for the idea of a possible relaunch of the show similar to X-Men 97 with a similar style. Back in the day, actually, in the 70s, during the Marv Wolfman era and the Chris Claremont era, those two were the biggest and best-selling properties at the big two, right? They even had a crazy crossover, which led to them actually discovering the Source Wall, and that being something that is entrenched in DC lore. Can you believe that? A Source Wall mention, the first version of it, the prototype, was from an X-Men New Teen Titans special crossover. That is crazy. But circling back, because, you know, I'm a bit foggy-minded, they were a team that represented potential, right? They were the next guard. They were characters, sidekicks, who stepped out of the shadows of their mentor, whether that is Robin becoming his own man, divorced from Batman. Same goes with Speedy and Green Arrow, Donna Troy, or like Wonder Girl and Wonder Woman, Aqualad and Aquaman, Kid Flash and the Flash, and it goes on and on and on, right? It was them finding their voices and discovering what kind of heroes that they actually wanted to be when they were on their own or just with their peers. When you don't have supervision, who are you really? I've always had this belief that you are a separate person, kind of, when you compare yourself with your parents, your parental figures, whoever that may be, and your friend group, but will you still stay true to your core? Yeah, obviously, if you have respect for your parents, or maybe your parents don't even care, but like, for me in my household, I would try not to swear, to seem like somebody who is at least kind of put together. But when you're out there on your own, yes, you might be with a group of your friends, quote unquote, because you don't know if that will change. You are still responsible for your own actions. There is no mommy or daddy that's going to be behind you, monitoring and making sure that you do the right thing. And that is the scary part about being a parent, and that is what made it so relatable, seeing these higher echelon heroes letting the birds out of the nest so that they can do their own thing. In a world that was dominated by these icons, the Titans themselves were proof that the next generation can matter as much or even more than the previous guard of Silver Age characters. The strength of this team, in my opinion, was always its growth. Every arc that there was, every falling out between the members, every death or reconciliation, it showed us that they were getting pushed closer and closer into adulthood. You can actually trace the evolution of Dick Grayson from the bright, optimistic Robin to a very confident leader as Nightwing. You could see somebody like Raven fighting to define herself despite all of her demonic origins, to even Cyborg and its struggle to find humanity. These guys were not static characters in the slightest. They were living, breathing characters who grew before our eyes. I always like to say that every single member of the Titans that I know of, at least, felt like that they were defined by the everyman archetype, which, if you don't know, look at Peter Parker, a character who very much feels like a real-life human being, right? He feels just like you and me. And as I've read the Titans, more so than any other team, one thing that popped out in my mind is that while I read about these characters, I can pinpoint certain mannerisms, certain ways of acting, and maybe certain flaws, and then I could actually place that character onto somebody that I know in real life, or maybe even like a person that I've seen on social media. That is what made the Titans special, but somewhere along the way, I don't know exactly where, the growth stopped, right? Today, the Titans are they're so sad, it sucks to say. It's such a hard thing to say for me because the medium sometimes feels afraid of change rather than actually embracing it with open arms. The Titans themselves, they are trapped in an endless loop of nostalgia, and they're doomed to basically repeat and reflect on the same stories that have minor tweaks and differences throughout the decades of their existence, and repeat those same emotional arcs that defined them literally 50 years ago. They've become the superhero equivalent of "I peaked in high school," and man has that, dude, that sentence has been stuck in my mind and I've had a hard time letting it go. But it just had to be said. These characters, most of them as a team, bring each other down more than they push each other to greater heights, and that is what they were when they started, or even back during post-crisis. But it has been literal decades since I felt that spark while reading their books. But there was a point in time where this wasn't the case, right? We have to remember where they got their sauce from, because in the 90s and the 2000s, it wasn't just experimental, it was very bold actually for them to do this. In post-crisis DC, they weren't afraid to take chances with these characters. The Titans were no longer just a group of sidekicks, they now became their own generation. DC is broken up into different generations, as I talked about before. The first one would be the JSA, second would be the Justice League generation, and the third would be the Teen Titans generation, fourth would be Young Justice, and so on. And I want to bring up Dan Jurgens' Teen Titans Volume 2, which wasn't afraid to wipe the slate clean, something that I think a lot of modern writers, even if you did enjoy this book or not, should take cues from, because it brought an entirely new cast, showing that the mantle of a Titan could evolve. Why did I say it like that? Could evolve and could be passed down. These weren't just the same heroes and faces going around the same laps that we've seen multiple times. They were new kids trying to live up to legacies that were already myths. Titans, the name itself, and it really shows us how much of an impact these former Titans kids, right, Nightwing, Roy Harper, those characters, have made when you have other kids trying to lead and follow in that example that they have made. That is interesting, right? It had ambition. It was, of course, a little bit rough around the edges, but it was a creative risk that showed the DC audience that this was what we can do. The team can become something new. Then we have the Devin Grayson run, which I think is criminally underrated. I just finished reading it about 2 months ago, I'm pretty sure, and here is the first time that I think the Titans was really confronted with what it meant to grow up. The series wasn't just about punching villains or saving the city or whatever thing and villain of the week that they had to face each month. It was about dealing with each other. The Fab Five, the original Teen Titans, they came face to face, and it showed us what happens when people who grew up together for a long portion of their life start to grow apart. They had resentment, some distance, some misunderstandings between each other, but that is real life. That's what made it work. They even went on multiple field trips with just the core OG members, leaving of course the additional members or the newer members from the Wolfman era behind so that they could deal with their differences. It was so rich on a character level, and this run right here is what made me come to the conclusion that every single character here can have a real-life counterpart if you start extrapolating and placing these characters, their face at least, onto the people that you know in your personal social circles. And then there's that beautiful moment in the series where they finally sit down and have a raw, emotional conversation about who they are, what they've become, and whether there is anything left of what they used to be. It's not just superhero drama, it's human drama. It's even about the fear of regression, stagnation. They even mention those keywords in the comic itself, of realizing that the thing that you once defied might now be coming back to bite you, right? It's now something that could hold you back. And ironically, that's the same theme that defines the Titans right now and their biggest problem today. But that is not all. I have a bit of a controversial take here depending on your opinions on this next run. But the 2000s itself was the last great era of the Titans. Quote unquote great, air quotes, blah de blah de blah. All of my safeguards here so that you guys don't dogpile me in the comments. But what we had here is very exciting in my Titans read through. It was progression through membership. After the death of Donna Troy, which was, let's be honest, really poorly done, writers Jeff Johns and Judd Winnick had a really interesting plan to redefine what the Titans were, right? What they could possibly be in this new age, right? They didn't just recycle the same team, they actually built two. What do I mean by this? Well, we had the Teen Titans itself, you know, where the senior members like Starfire, like Beast Boy, like Cyborg took on their role as mentors of the next generation. All the characters from the 2003 Teen Titans show, minus Dick Grayson, Robin, but what they did do is they did a merger between Teen Titans and the Young Justice team by Peter David, and this coalition of powers actually led to a really interesting continuation for both groups into this singular comic. On the other side, you had a team called the Outsiders, which was a very much refurbished Batman Black Ops team. It was turned into a darker, more mature Black Ops Teen Titans team, with Nightwing and Arsenal leading the charge, with other younger heroes like Jade, like Thunder, who's the daughter of Black Lightning, and of course other characters like Captain Marvel Jr. join from time to time, and it really made them feel like the X-Men of the DC universe, what they were always meant to be, because the Outsiders were effectively the X-Force of the Titans, and they even did multiple crossovers with each other. The balance and the synergy between these two teams was perfect. New forces joined every single year to keep the lineup and the storylines fresh. Cassie Sandsmark, Tim Drake, Connor Kent, Bart Allen, of course members of Young Justice that I once mentioned, but also Mia Darden, Speedy, to Miss Martian, to Jaime Reyes, who was of course the new Blue Beetle at the time of this book, and even Static. It all felt like the torch was finally being passed. The Titans themselves weren't just looking backwards anymore, they were building towards a future. Even characters like Tim Drake, the younger generations below the Titan generation, actually ended up getting physical progression in terms of their costumes and their identity, of course becoming Red Robin. We even had Bart Allen, you might like this, you might hate this, becoming Kid Flash and then eventually becoming the Flash himself. Dick Grayson becoming Batman, Arsenal becoming Red Arrow, a lot of these characters becoming a part of the Justice League, while we had the Young Justice generation really fill out and bring the legacy needed to be a Titan. Everyone had a place. Wally himself had a family. He's been a part of the JLA for years now, prior to when this coalition happened. Everyone was evolving in real time. I know a lot of people ask, how could you possibly measure up to the legacy of your predecessors, to Batman, to the Man of Tomorrow, the symbol of hope himself, to the symbol of truth herself? How is that possible? But at this point in time, it felt less like something that they were chasing and more like something that they were living. But then, of course, came the regression. Where does it all fall apart? Well, when you try to put a magnifying glass to where the problem could possibly be, usually when it comes to DC, it's one of two things. One, Heroes in Crisis, which of course kind of fumbled a lot of the heroes in the Titans generation, which I didn't mention that I probably should, and the Rick Grayson arc, that was horrible. Why did that even happen? But thankfully, the characters that are affected by that, Dick Grayson, Roy Harper, and Wally West, are the three characters in that entire generation safe from this curse, because all of them are in either character-defining arcs right now, or were in that not too long ago. They're in a pretty good spot, and they're kind of divorced from every other Titans member. Either way, the source of the problem, the second most likely option, is the New 52, the reset button that destroyed basically everything because all the character developments was gone. And while this worked for characters like Batman, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, which they didn't even fully reset that, but for those characters, I think you can get away with it. But when it comes to the Titans generation, those guys right there, they are reliant on having decades upon decades of stories that slowly but surely and through big arcs here and there gave them what they needed to test their mettle. Without all of that, they become a shell of who they once was and way less interesting than they really should be. Wally West himself, he disappeared. Roy was rebooted into somebody that was a hollow version of himself, and the complicated human dynamics were stripped away. DC tried to bring the Titans back, but it wasn't out of story necessity. It was because somebody in editorial remembered, oh wait, those Titan guys, those 5-6 characters, yeah, fans like them and they bring sales, maybe we should get them back. And instead of trying to create new stories, they decided to go for the 1-2 copy and paste punch. We got endless cycles of the Trigon arc, of the Raven falls under his control, of Beast Boy struggling with his animal side, with Cyborg struggling with his humanity, and being more technological than human. We've been through these same character beats, but they are remixing it slightly so that people who are from a former reading level or reading era will like push it under the rug and be like, okay, fine, technically it wasn't done one-to-one, and then newer readers won't even know. So they think they can get away with this, but you can't if you do it so many times. You start to build a pattern. It's like watching somebody try to relive their glory days, playing the same mixtape that they made while they were in high school. It doesn't hit the same. The problem is that the world itself has changed, so these characters have to change with it, something that they did ever since post-crisis really, and it stopped, and it hasn't hit the gas in the past. How long has it been since the New 52? Dude, oh my gosh, that is 14 years without a banger run. Are they even worth it anymore? But we still see the foundation on a basic level because yeah, Nightwing isn't the same teenager who was trying to prove himself. Wally isn't that same insecure kid trying to run out of Barry's shadow. These guys, they're adults, they've built relationships, lives, families, and yet every few years, they are dragged back into Titan's Tower to replay the same games. Like, dude, get new material. It's like you're stuck in a time loop, which is very ironic considering one of your members is a master of the Speed Force. It's a regression that is disguised as a reunion that happens every couple of years. Even when DC tried to modernize their work and actually make something new with projects like the Titans Academy, it fell within the same trap. Yes, there were more new characters, but it led to the new generation being neglected to focus on and orbit the same 5, 6, 7 characters that we've been following since the 1980s. Instead of being full-on mentors, they became babysitters. But what do we need for these characters to experience growth and to grow up as a team? The Justice League could never be a bridge between generations. They already did it with Young Justice, and that might or might not be canon, but they should be seen as an innovator, right? They are people who try something new. Yes, the Justice League should be that stable rock that shouldn't really ever change too much, and when it does, it should just be adding more members. The Titans themselves, what are they? they fulfill a role that can be seen somewhat like the X-Men. They could run an entire Xavier school for children. The Academy was exactly that. It was a school for gifted youngsters, people with a metahuman gene, or somebody who's been spliced with some sort of animal DNA, or something that gave them superpowers. A place that feels alive, right? With like a new blood here to fill the classrooms and the hallways. Characters that we haven't met yet. Stories that haven't yet been told. A book like this being out actually dares to pose the question, what would it look like if the Titans took a step back, because they are the team that is very proactive and very energetic, but what if our core cast of characters actually decide to see and examine what it would look like if the world was able to spin without their influence? Or let them mentor, let them advise, let them shape the next wave of heroes, because if the Titans are stuck in this wave, they will stay stuck living in that Matrix trap for the next 100 years. But what do you guys think? I know I'm being a bit aggressive, but I feel like DC has lost faith in the journey that these characters could go on. Why do they think that it's been complete? Yeah, they've been on their hero's journey. Add another damn circle. We can do more, and the blueprint is already there. Just add a Teen Titans spin to it. Let me know down in the comments below, because my process of what Teen Titans are people that show us that growing up isn't something to fear. It's something that is worth fighting for. Why aren't we pushing for that? Why isn't that the message, the coat of arms to every book that we read coming out of DC with these established characters? But yeah, remember to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live, and yeah, see you later. Deuces, peace.